Hi, everyone. Welcome to our American Mussar weekly gathering. This week, we are going to be exploring the soul trait of generosity. That is not one that is in the book. It's not one we usually cover. But it really felt like when we're focusing on chesed and just after spending a whole month on gratitude, that generosity seemed like a very nice compliment as a nice place to go next. We'll begin as we always do with a short meditation. So please relax in your chair and close your eyes. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. As you go at your own pace of inhaling and exhaling, if thoughts would come into your head, just observe them and let them pass. Like a car moving past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema, and on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. And Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. And Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Hi, Sarah. Welcome.
Hi.
You have joined us during the meditation. Okay, so now we'll get started. So this is a quote from Rabbi Chaim Luzzatto, who wrote Path of the Just. It's one of the great Mussar books, written 16th-ish century. It's really incredible. Rabbi Israel Salanter, who started the Mussar movement of the 19th century in Lithuania, said he spent 9 years studying this book, and I can believe it. It's got a lot going on. But here's an idea, which we'll see how straightforward this may or may not be. What is he talking about? External motions stimulate the internal ones. I'm going to thoughts, questions, comments, Wendy.
Well, it made me think of dance. Definitely when I'm dancing, especially with synagogue, uh, with people with Israeli folk dance, it definitely uh, your emotions are bringing emotions to you.
Hmm.
Thankfulness sometimes to the divine, thankfulness just to be with the people, and thankfulness for the music, uh, gratitude.
Yeah, wonderful. So dance, for you, internal motion is an emotion, something that happens. That's one type of change of the internal world that you've experienced from an external motion. Love it. Um, Other thoughts? What does he mean by external motion first? Like Wendy gave an example of dance. What are other types of external motions? Yeah, Sue.
Well, I was thinking when we see something externally that's beautiful, it
Mhm,
makes us feel inside great. So
mhm.
that's, I mean, what was the quote was, hold on.
Uh,
Um,
Put it in the chat. External.
External motions. So the motion would be the seeing
Uh-huh.
or the observing of the beautiful sunrise or sunset, and that
Yeah.
stimulates your heart, really, or your appreciation.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's using like one of our senses, like seeing something, it leads to an emotional reaction. Yeah. Well, why is it that in a Mussar practice, we always talk about taking an action? Like, what is the significance? And sometimes I'll say, what's one thing you're going to do this week? Like maybe for humility is like park considerately, or when I'm at dinner, I'm going to let someone else speak first, or I'm going to listen more. Why are we doing actions like that? Why do we focus on taking an action? Yeah, Wendy.
Why, if you're just thinking about something, then you're not taking it in. It's not becoming part of you.
Yeah, right. Right. So, and then by extension, if I understand right, by doing, we take it in more,
It becomes part of us.
becomes part of us. So if I'm parking more considerately and I'm not like taking up two parking spaces, and I'm working on humility, what changes inside of me? What is that becoming a part of? Yeah, Marjorie, you remember to unmute, please. Right. It's okay.
Okay,
Fine.
there was a
Great.
bar over my little mute. So I think that the response, it's a practice. You're practicing a to do what like taking up less space, for example. By keep practicing it, it becomes an automatic response. That's your immediate response rather than, well, it's not rather than going into like something that's more negative.
Yeah.
If you keep practicing the positive response, it just becomes innate.
Hmm. Yeah, it becomes more innate. Absolutely. And so something is happening, which is making it more innate, and maybe it's some kind of internal change that's making it more innate. Let's hear from Karen and then from Wendy.
Actions are transformative. That's how we um, bring our thoughts uh, to manifestation, is
Hmm.
my take.
Yeah, so the very taking of an action is transformative. Okay, Wendy.
Um, you feel good, but that's not why. Um, you recognize the divine spark in yourself, and then you can recognize the divine spark in others. But I
Yeah,
think that's that transformation that Karen was talking about.
yeah. So anyone else want to add something here? Because I think you've all kind of talked around it and some of you have become pretty close. But yes, Sarah.
So, for whatever reason, I wrote down act as if. And I was thinking of the external motion the stimulates the internal ones. So sometimes, you might not sometimes acting as if you are you can act you can think you can act your way into right action. You can't think your way into right action. You have to act your way into right action. So sometimes acting as if, you step up and then the change, and then you feel good about it. Then you can experience, you might not feel like going to the gym, but you go to the gym and then you're like, wow, I feel great. I always forget how good it feels. I mean, but it's, with other things too. Like if you're not taking up 2 parking spots, you can say, okay, I'm not being an asshole, I'm not taking 2 spots. Because sometimes if you go and the parking lot's full and somebody takes 2 spots and there's no spot, you think, God, how inconsiderate. So,
Yeah, yeah. So until you actually go to the gym, unless you actually park considerately, even when you're rushed, you haven't really done anything. But then when you actually do it, it has an impact. Yeah, I should call my father more. Well, unless I call, it doesn't count for anything. It's just, oh, I should call, I should do this, I should do that. Karen.
So, in response to the external actions, I'm thinking that it is much easier to react than it is to act.
Mm,
And so, external stimuli, external actions, whatever it is, we are quick to react. Mussar asks us to consider particular traits and what our reactions are and how we can act first or act following to make improvements.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that distinction between the action and the reaction. And so to ask a slightly different or related question, if we think about our spectrum diagram, and I don't want to put up the spectrum of generosity right now, but how do we actually move? Like if we're too much on the, impatient side, let's say of patience, how do we actually become more patient? How do we actually change our soul's balance? Wendy.
Well, if you look at this spectrum, look like this. And so I'm thinking you have to go up.
Yeah, yeah, we have to, go to a different place on the spectrum, but how do we actually do that?
Trampoline. No, I'm kidding.
Marjorie, what do you think?
I think you have to take an immediate action. I don't think if you see that, if you recognize your own impatience, take a minute, figure out, well, what's going on here, and then take an action to change it. You have to do something actually physical
Yeah, this is
within yourself. You have to tell yourself, what's going on here, how do I want to improve this? How do I want to change it? Or you see a therapist, I don't know.
yeah,
But
thank you, Marjorie. But you're
yes.
sort of calling in, and then this is very similar to like, we could talk about cognitive behavioral therapy perhaps, but first I want to talk to Mike, hear from Michael.
I was going to say repeated action, or at least for me, it's not just an action, it's
Mhm.
forming some kind of different habit,
Yeah,
and looking for those moments and embracing those moments where I can be challenged in it.
yeah,
Because sometimes it's easy to be patient, but other times it's not for me. So it's not just being patient when it's easy to be patient, it's being patient when it's really plucking on my last nerve.
yeah. Yeah, this is kind of the secret sauce to Musar. This is why it's different than other sorts of things. It's about taking action. It is about like there's a story in the book in the patience chapter about my friend gosh, I'm blanking on her name. But she was really an impatient person. And so what she decided to do, and she was a rageaholic driver, she would let every car merge in front of her. And not only did it make her drives more pleasant, but she became more patient with her kids and with her family. Because that's the change. It's like with the Mussar language, it's you're actually resetting your soul balance. So it's not, I'm a more patient driver. I'm more patient, period. And that's, I think Luzzatto, I think that was what he was talking about. It's not sort of completely clear, but it's like this external motion of, yeah, come on in, go ahead and merge in front of me, changes the soul. Or as neurobiologists would like to say, neurons that fire together, wire together. It is changing habits. It's doing things repeatedly, as Michael said. Sarah,
It's not enough to just think it, it's not enough to say, I really want to be a more patient person. You
right,
have to think of an action or a way that you're going to practice that.
right.
And so, I mean, and that's true with, you know, many things,
Yeah,
patience, kindness, consideration. Yeah, you have to take the action. So that's the secret sauce.
yes, yes. And you got to step a little bit out of your comfort zone too, as Michael talked about. Like if you try to get too far outside of your comfort zone, it might be hard to do. But if you just go a little bit out of your comfort zone, then all of a sudden, things can start to happen.
And I agree also with what Michael said. It has to be repeated. You
Yeah.
know, that's how you change habits. You have to practice things repeatedly. Like daily meditation or daily writing or daily exercise or daily whatever or monthly whatever.
Right. Right. All right. Yes. Sue.
I was just thinking too that maybe it's an inaction. So if you think about humility, right, and you're always speaking, so maybe you take a step back and you let someone else speak. So that's an inaction.
Mm,
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's an action.
absolutely.
It's a thought process, but it's not doing the thing that you were not doing. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, we can get philosophical, but for me, it's like I'm going to act by being still as opposed to talking. Yeah. Karen.
So for me, this is the impetus behind doing any of this work, which is why does it matter to me?
Mm,
You ask yourself, why do I care if I'm more patient or not? And you have a reason for wanting to be more patient. Then I think it's easier to find out how you can work on that and then go ahead and do it. But
mm,
without that, why is it important to me to change this, to do this, to look at myself, to recognize this? It's really hard to get anything done.
yeah. Yeah. I thank you. That's important. What's the impact it's going to have in our life? And it's a good motivation. All right, well, let's take this a little bit deeper. So may I have a volunteer to uh, unmute and read this slide?
I'll do it. Spontaneous giving from the heart, tzedakah, obligatory giving.
All right, so
How
let's just pause there. So these are the two different forms of generosity. This is kind of how we're giving. This is our definition slide. So what's the difference? First of all, before we even go to the second part, what's the difference between spontaneous giving and obligatory giving? Are people and probably why I'm asking is, are people familiar with this idea of tzedakah, of obligatory giving.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we have a tzedakah box and we keep all of the coins in there. And then at the end of the month, we decide what to do with it, right? So
Mhm.
that's obligatory, but there is kind of a spontaneity in it, in which at the time that we're going to choose. But I guess it's obligatory to save that so that you'd be ready to give it, I guess. I don't know. I was thinking both of them are a lot alike.
Yeah. Yeah, Sue.
I was thinking that to me, I think that tzedakah is more like Shabbat, like it's obligatory. It's one of the things you do. You keep Shabbat, you give tzedakah.
Mhm.
Whereas in the other case, it's more from your heart or generosity. You get up today and I'm going to make breakfast for my husband, which I never do, and that's coming from my heart.
Right.
So that's how I think of the difference between the two. Whereas tzedakah, you're kind of, I don't know if commanded is the right word, but you're supposed to, give tzedakah.
Yeah, no, that is the right word. That's like right up there with, the other commandments about do not steal and, don't take the Lord's name in vain and don't, boil a kid in its mother's milk and you shall give 10% of the harvest to the poor. Boom, that's how we're supposed to show up. Yes, Karen.
Obligatory to me is required and time bound.
Hmm. Yeah, so tell me more. Like about the time bound part, perhaps.
Okay, a lot of Jewish ritual is time bound.
Hmm.
At if we do certain things at particular times, I think it gives a flow to our life, for instance.
Yeah, yeah. And tzedakah has been, there's different ways that it's done. Like there used to be people who would kind of manage the tzedakah and people would give their coins and then, someone would say, okay, here's a list of people in the community who need support. And so they would go and give that out. And at the great synagogue in Rome, there was a little museum and it had like copies of the lists from the 18th century of like the people who were getting tzedakah. So this was like a really big deal, and when we visited a synagogue, sorry, I sound like a world traveler here, but we visited a synagogue in Pisa and there was like 4 slots in the wall and you could pick where your tzedakah would go to. And it was like supporting scholars in Tiberias, the Widows and Orphans Fund. It's kind of like when you're giving on a website, where do you want to designate your gift? So yeah, so this is sort of the obligatory giving, and then there's the kind of spontaneous, which it's like, oh, I just feel like giving to such and such, and so I'm going to share the slide again. So Marjorie, do you want to read this last bullet?
How do these two forms of generosity relate to Lozato quote? External motions stimulate the internal ones.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share and I'll put this in the chat. So we've got these two forms of giving. One is required and one is spontaneous. And then we have this idea that we've been talking about, we're actually doing stuff leads to internal changes. So what are these related at all? And hint, I think they are. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Um, Wendy.
Sorry, guys, but I'm going to leave pretty soon. That just reminded me so much of what Sue said a few minutes ago about seeing. Well, our senses, we grasp the external. So if you see a lot of little children and they're all sitting at the bench and they're not having anything to eat, then you become aware. And then the spontaneity comes from your heart internally. You want to help them. And so that's senses could lead to that as an external motion, not emotion, motion.
Hmm. Thank you, Wendy. Michael.
I'm not sure if this is where you're going with this, but I'm thinking that required or commanded giving, if you do it consistently and it becomes a habit, makes it more likely that you would start to give spontaneously because it becomes a habit, becomes something that you do without thinking about it. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if that's where you were going with that.
that is where I was going with that. That is yes, Marjorie.
Well, I just started thinking like, are these two, do they intersect? That was
Mhm,
like what I just started thinking about. And I think Michael kind of absolutely touched on that.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm gonna share another slide here. Yeah, we'll do this one. Slightly different formulation of the spectrum of generosity, but I think this is kind of what we're talking about. So, um, so what are we seeing here? On the left would be too little generosity. It's not marked. On the right, excessive generosity. In the middle, we're kind of getting um, into kind of the balance zone. But there's this phrase here, Timtum Halev, the stopped up heart. Has anybody heard of this before? Oops. Yeah, Sue.
Is it related to Pharaoh who hardened his heart or
A
not?
little bit. Yeah, it may be. It's kind of a similar idea. Yeah, it is a bit related to that. I'll give a definition. But the idea is if you have this sort of you're being really stingy, and I think the idea is your heart gets stopped up where maybe it's partially losing compassion, partially just a fear that if you give something away, you're not going to have enough, going back to the abundance scarcity. The idea is if you do this obligatory giving, it gets us out of like the stinginess and does, as Michael was saying, sort of open us up where we can actually start feeling, more spontaneous generosity. And then, but if we go too far, then it could be excess generosity where we're giving more than we can afford. And I used to help my mom with her finances, and she was like giving away so much money that she was having troubles. She didn't have very much money, and partly she was spending it on stuff, but it's like, but she always wanted to have her $50 going to the Israel fund or something. Even if she only had $200, but that was really important to her. That was, and maybe that's excessive, maybe it isn't, but there are certainly grounds, which maybe it's a little bit too much. So let's get ready for our breakout rooms.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Why on that, can you show that continuum again?
yeah.
Why is obligatory giving on the side of stinginess? Isn't that a good thing to give? I mean, isn't it I think of that being generous, but obligatory, but still generous. So that's my
Yeah, it's not a perfect formulation, but the idea is that if you're only giving out of out of obligatory and it's not, there's no spontaneity, that it's a little bit more on the stingy side. The way this is, maybe it's a little, too close to stinginess, but if we sort of forget the actual distances, I think that's the idea. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there should be both. I mean, but some people are very, I mean, I'm just thinking about donors who give a lot of money and they're
Yeah.
very generous.
Mhm.
And I would think of them as generous, even though it's to them it's obligatory.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm just thinking about it now. I never thought about it before.
Well, is it obligatory for a big donor to write a big check?
I guess that's not, I guess you're right. That's coming from their choice, so it's not obligatory. Yeah, okay. Thanks. I
Sure.
see that now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So here's where some want to read this teaching from Rabbi Leon.
I'll go ahead. It's natural to have what the Mussar teachers call Timtum Ha'alev, a blocked or barricaded heart. That's the feeling that we just can't give anymore, usually out of fear that if we give too much away, we'll be somehow diminished.
Okay, so we'll go into breakout rooms and kind of you can talk about this idea, the Timtum Halev. And also I'm curious how like generosity can help us practice the soul trait of chesed. And then what are some actions that we might take to unblock our hearts or to overcome some of these fears? So I'm going to start opening the breakout rooms and then I'll copy this into the chat as well. Um, okay, so the breakout rooms are open.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So how were those discussions? What were some of the things that came up? Uh, I would love to hear. Who would like to share first? Yes, Sarah.
Well, it was sort of a hard topic. And we kind of danced around it a bit. Um, I don't know. I mean, I guess I just wanted to say that it was a little bit difficult to discuss for some reason. We found things to discuss, but I'm not sure if we
Yeah.
discussed that. So anyway.
Yeah, I've kind of sensed this one is not clicking this week. Just sort of for whatever reason. Yeah. Okay,
So
Sue.
we started with trying to define the difference between generosity and hesed.
Uh-huh.
And we kind of got stuck a little bit because we kind of felt like they were the same thing until we looked at the definition that actually the second part of generosity, where it's, obligatory giving, that we felt that was different in the sense that your heart, it wasn't heart-based.
Yeah.
So that was one point. And then oh, Michael and Martin, help me out. What else did we talk about?
He took a swing at some barriers, and the things I wrote down anyway, which may not be everything, but knowing yourself and sort of being aware of how you're thinking about yourself in those moments when there's a time to give, not judging others who you might, because that makes you less likely to be generous with them, generous of spirit, if not money and other things. And
Right.
then
Oh,
compassion.
they're just a drug addict.
Right. You don't want to judge that person because you haven't walked in their shoes, and so that's not going to
Yeah.
help. And then compassion.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you. Those are all great things that can kind of help overcome some of these barriers. Marjorie.
We discussed, or I discussed with my partner, that generosity is not necessarily, it doesn't always have to be a monetary amount either.
Mhm.
Time, your intention. Because you might, for example, you might prepare, somebody needs moved into your neighborhood, they want a meal, you bring a meal, and this person keeps kosher and the meal's not kosher. It's your intention.
Mhm.
What and the recipient hopefully, will accept it and not, not make a big deal out of it, or explain to you, like, I really appreciate it. But it's your intentions. I think that's a big part of generosity and hesed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's our intentions. And we can also be generous in our reactions. Like, there's this great Israeli movie called The Women's Balcony. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but it's about, um, but it's a Sephardic community in Jerusalem, and their rabbi gets injured, and this very Haredi rabbi sort of comes in to help out, and then he starts trying to really change everyone's practice, and someone becomes more some of the women become more kosher and start covering their heads, and another woman brings them some food, and she says, "I cannot accept this because your kitchen has not been inspected." And she said to her, "Well, what happened to you? Because I remember we were on vacation in Cyprus and someone brought us pork chops for dinner. And you like hid the food in your purse so that their feelings would not be hurt. So if you don't want to eat my food, that's fine. But why would you just reject me like this and just say, because we can be generous with how we act as well. And it was just felt like in this example of the movie, a very stingy, stopped up heart. I'm not going to give you kind of any love or courtesy or recognize the intention of giving that you're coming with. And speaking of that, what if I say, "Hey, can I help you? Can I bring you some food? You're recovering, you broke your leg. Can I bring you dinner?" And you say, "No, I'll just use DoorDash." I don't know if anyone has experienced that on one side or another. "Oh, no, thanks. I don't want to put you out." What's wrong with that? Yeah, Sarah.
Well, sometimes it's hard to accept. For me, I'm just talking about me. Sometimes it's hard for me to accept kindness,
Yeah.
or help. And like in that example you just said, you broke your leg and somebody's offering you food, and it's like, even though they're offering, somehow sometimes I feel like, oh, I don't want to put them out, so I'm not sure so I guess my heart might be a little stopped up at times. Need Roto-Rooter.
Need a rotor-rooter. We need the X-lax at the heart.
Yeah, right, and everything.
Martin and then Karen.
Yeah, I'm on audio. Yeah.
You are.
Yeah. So I've had this situation where I react negatively. I'll do something that I think is very thoughtful for another person, or it's a gift. And then I hear it happens often enough where it says, "Oh, you shouldn't have." And rather than a thank you. And but maybe and they probably mean thank you, but somehow when I hear those words, you should. Oh, I mean, should I take it back? Would I make it feel better? You know.
Hey,
Anyway,
don't get too close.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
Stay away, don't get too close. You shouldn't have. God forbid someone's
Yeah,
nice to me, you know.
yeah. I mean, now maybe that's just my own personal problem. But
No, not at all. No, you're onto something. This is something
okay.
really important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Karen.
If someone gives me something and it's not what I want, I'm more likely to say thank you and leave it at that, figure out what to do with it. But if they ask in advance, can I bring you something? Or some other question that I can answer no to, and I say no or no, thank you. To me, part of chesed, over and above kindness, is being able to understand that when someone says no, that's a complete sentence all by itself. It actually can be written with a period right after it.
Hmm.
And that I can respect that without being insulted.
Yeah.
So if you're standing there with a pie in front of me, I don't know if your kitchen is kosher or not, I would probably just say thank you. And if I knew you well, thought I would get to know you well enough, I may explain over time, if not
Yeah.
then. But if you're asking me in advance and I say no or no thank you or something that is not rude, um, I kind of hope that other people will not be offended and feel like they have to take charge of me because I'm an adult with my own voice. And to me, that was a complete sentence. Anyway, that was just my share.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, if someone says to me, Greg, can I bring you a pizza? I would say no, because I can't eat pizza. You know, I'm gluten-free, I'm dairy-free. Unfortunately. Um, but I think sometimes, though, for the case where Martin's talking about, where sometimes it's almost like this reflex, no, no, you shouldn't have. No, I don't need any help. In a way, we're kind of stealing from them the opportunity to do a generous act. You know, it's almost a form of generosity to just accept help. And maybe that's a way we can practice generosity, is just allowing people to kind of be helpful. Yes, Michael.
I think some of it may be, at least for me, can I suss out what the motivations of the person who's doing the giving in that situation are? If they're doing it to make themselves feel better, then that's a different thing than if they really have some caring for me.
Yeah,
Right? But that requires a level of patience and care and thoughtfulness on my part to sort of be able to suss out in my own, as best as I can,
yeah,
where I think this person's coming from.
yeah. Sarah.
This is sort of a, I'll just say it, I don't need to qualify. If somebody says to you, "Oh, that's a beautiful outfit you're wearing," or "I love your dress," and your reply would be, "Oh, this old rag," or whatever. It's sort of similar to, what Martin was saying, or, "Oh, you look so pretty," and you can't, and like you can't accept a compliment.
Mhm.
Like when somebody is being generous and kind, it's nice to say thank you,
Yeah,
and then you're really, allowing them their generosity, and so sometimes, we can stop it for whatever reason, our own hangups.
yeah, yeah. And thank you, Sarah. I think that was really well said. And what it's reminding me of is like every time we encounter another person, it's an opportunity for connection. And if someone says, can I bring you, oh, you broke your leg, can I bring you lasagna, or can I bring you, some chicken or whatever. It's a bid for connection. And aside from like kosher issues, so, can I come by or give you a gift card to get food or whatever, a DoorDash gift card. It's a bid for connection. And so the question is, how do we respond to that? Do we respond in a way that sort of makes a joke of it, like this old rag, or no, no, thank you? Or is it, like I have a friend who, will say things like, that is so kind of you, or oh, that's really nice of you to think of that, or nice of you to ask about that, or oh, it's so nice of you to offer, but I have so many food allergies that unfortunately I can't accept gifts of food, but I'm so touched that you thought of me. So that's where, as part of our Mussar journey, our like mindfulness of Menschy behavior, of being a good human being, that's where we can sort of respond in a generous way. That's sort of one of my insights. And that's a connection to chesed, is doing something without expecting anything in return. If I'm responding in a generous way, I'm not expecting like any response to that. So kind of you to think of that. I really, really appreciate it. And it means a lot to me. That's connecting, and I'm not expecting anything in return. I'm responding positively to a bid for connection and friendship.
I have a great little anecdote that kind of relates. So the indicator light for my tire came on the dash, and I got new license plates that I had to get replaced or put on my car so that I wouldn't get a ticket for expired tabs. And so I went to the gas station down the block, and this kid helped me out, and it took a few minutes. And I came back that afternoon with some cash, and I just gave him a tip. Well, you would have thought I just gave him, I don't know what. He was like, you just made my day. So that kind of
Mm,
experience was so, knowing that I made somebody's day with a small tip made me feel so good that I did something to benefit somebody else's day. And it was a small gesture, but it's amazing what a small little gesture can do for
absolutely.
me, for
Thank
me.
you, Marjorie. And we'll hear from Sarah, and then we'll need to wrap up.
I forgot what I was going to say.
You sure?
I think so. Well, I guess it was, that the idea of the closed heart, and to keep your heart open, you have to, like, if people say, you look nice, or this, that's so kind, like when you do acts of generosity, um, if you don't accept it, you have a closed heart.
Mm,
And it's like, I don't know, I can't remember who was saying that the connecting, when somebody is trying to reach out and says something kind, it's nice to sort of receive it and acknowledge it. And if you don't, then you kind of have this closed off heart, and it's less good.
well, thank you. Okay, well, we're gonna close in a minute, but I'm glad we got a little, I felt like the conversation got a little better after our breakout rooms, even though I felt like we hit a little bit of a groove. Maybe I presented things that were a little easier to connect with. So um, I appreciate all of you hanging in there and being here today. So we'll just close our eyes, and we'll just visualize the open hand of giving, the open hand of receiving, the open hand of friendship. Imagine someone else taking your hand and just feeling that level of connection. Like the connection that we share here today. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, thank you all so much for being here. If you're watching the recording, thank you so much for getting to the end. Please give us a like if you lasted this long and you liked it. Please give us a like on YouTube. Yeah, thank you all. And